Welcome to My Books and Storytime by Mybooksandstorytime. Critical Thinkers by Albert Rutherford. In a world overflowing with information, much of it biased, misleading, or outright false, the ability to think critically has never been more vital. Albert Rutherford opens Critical Thinkers with a stark reminder that we are not naturally equipped to navigate the complexities of modern life. Evolutionarily, our brains were shaped for survival, not nuanced analysis. As a result, we are prone to cognitive shortcuts, emotional reasoning, and snap judgments, all of which were useful for avoiding predators, but are catastrophic when trying to evaluate political arguments, business decisions, or personal relationships in today's information age. Rutherford's central message is clear. Critical thinking is a learned skill, not an innate talent. No one is born thinking critically. We are all conditioned by our environments, biases, and emotions. But with deliberate practice, reflection, and disciplined techniques, we can sharpen our ability to analyze situations objectively, spot flawed reasoning, and make more thoughtful decisions. Throughout the book, Rutherford provides both philosophical grounding and practical tools to help readers become active, engaged critical thinkers, capable of independent thought and intellectual resilience. Chapter 1: The Foundations of Critical Thinking. Critical thinking is often misunderstood as simply being skeptical or contrarian, but Rutherford emphasizes that true critical thinking is a balanced, methodical process of inquiry. It begins with curiosity, the desire to understand, rather than simply to confirm what we already believe. From there, it involves systematically questioning the source, context, and logic behind information or arguments. Rutherford explains that critical thinking isn't confined to academia. It applies just as much to evaluating the news we consume, the social media posts we share, or the workplace policies we follow. What sets critical thinkers apart is their willingness to slow down, ask tough questions, and entertain multiple perspectives before forming a conclusion. This openness to complexity is both the foundation and the ultimate goal of critical thinking. Chapter 2: Cognitive Biases, the Invisible Forces Shaping Our Thoughts. One of the biggest obstacles to clear thinking is our own mind. Rutherford dedicates significant attention to cognitive biases, those subtle, automatic distortions in how we perceive and process information. From confirmation bias, our tendency to favor information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs, to availability bias, our tendency to overestimate the importance of easily recalled events. These biases quietly warp our judgment at every turn. What's particularly insidious about biases, Rutherford explains, is that they operate beneath the surface of awareness. We often feel confident in our conclusions even when they're built on faulty assumptions or incomplete data. Critical thinkers learn to recognize their own biases, not to eliminate them entirely, which is impossible, but to correct for them by seeking contradictory evidence, slowing their thinking process, and applying structured reasoning techniques. Chapter 3: The Art of Asking Better Questions. At the heart of critical thinking is the ability to ask powerful questions. Questions that don't just confirm what we want to believe, but that reveal deeper truths and challenge assumptions. Rutherford breaks down how skilled thinkers structure their inquiries to uncover hidden assumptions, reveal gaps in logic, and explore alternative explanations. Instead of asking, "Is this true?" critical thinkers ask, "What evidence supports this? What might I be missing? Who benefits if I believe this?" Good questions are open-ended, precise, and layered, encouraging further exploration rather than shutting down conversation. This shift from answer-seeking to question-exploring is a hallmark of the critical thinker's mindset. Chapter 4: Logical Fallacies, Spotting Flaws in Reasoning. Rutherford meticulously covers the most common logical fallacies, the reasoning errors that appear in everything from political debates to social media arguments. These include ad hominem attacks, discrediting the speaker rather than addressing the argument, strawman fallacies, misrepresenting an argument to make it easier to attack, and false dilemmas, presenting two extremes as the only possible options. But understanding fallacies is not just about identifying others' errors. It's about recognizing when we rely on them ourselves. Rutherford emphasizes that critical thinkers cultivate intellectual humility, admitting when their own reasoning is flawed and welcoming correction. This commitment to internal honesty is the backbone of intellectual growth. Chapter 5: Evidence: not all information is created equal. One of the greatest skills critical thinkers develop is the ability to evaluate evidence. Not all data carries the same weight, and Rutherford teaches readers how to assess the credibility, reliability, and relevance of information sources. This requires understanding how data is collected, what incentives shape its presentation, and how context influences interpretation. Critical thinkers know that a single anecdote, however emotionally compelling, is not equivalent to a systematic study. They also learn to distinguish correlation from causation, a distinction often lost in sensational headlines. Rutherford highlights the importance of primary sources, peer-reviewed research, and transparent methodology, especially in an era where misinformation and manipulated data are rampant. The goal isn't to reject all data, but to develop the discernment to sift gold from gravel. Chapter 6: Emotional Reasoning When Feelings Cloud Judgment. Emotions aren't the enemy of critical thinking, but they can be formidable obstacles if left unchecked. Rutherford explores how fear, anger, and tribal loyalty often override rational analysis. When we feel threatened, whether by new information that challenges our identity or by opposing political views, our brains shift into defensive mode, prioritizing survival over truth. Critical thinkers don't suppress emotions, but they learn to recognize emotional triggers and pause before reacting. Rutherford offers practical exercises for cultivating emotional distance, allowing space for curiosity rather than reflexive defense. This emotional self-awareness is critical for maintaining intellectual flexibility. Chapter 7: The Power of Perspective Taking. One of the most underappreciated skills of critical thinkers is their ability to consider issues from multiple perspectives. Rather than seeing every issue through a rigid personal lens, they actively seek out opposing viewpoints, not to win, but to understand. This doesn't mean abandoning their own values, but it does mean recognizing that no single perspective holds all the truth. Rutherford encourages engaging with viewpoints that challenge our biases, not just to strengthen our own arguments, but to cultivate empathy and intellectual agility. This openness to other views is one of the defining characteristics of intellectually mature thinkers. Chapter 8: Decision-Making in Uncertainty. In real life, we rarely have perfect information. Critical thinking isn't about waiting until all uncertainty is eliminated. It's about making the best possible decision with the available evidence, while remaining open to revision as new information emerges. Rutherford describes this as adaptive thinking, balancing confidence in your current conclusions with openness to change. Critical thinkers learn to differentiate between high-confidence and low-confidence beliefs, adjusting their certainty based on the strength of the evidence. They also develop contingency plans, imagining scenarios where they might be wrong and identifying what would change their mind. This willingness to revise beliefs is a hallmark of intellectual integrity. Chapter 9: Building Your Critical Thinking Toolkit. Rutherford doesn't just describe critical thinking. He provides practical tools for developing it. These include techniques like the 5 whys, repeatedly asking why to get to the root of a problem; devil's advocacy, actively arguing against your own position; the ladder of inference, tracking how you moved from data to conclusion; premortems, imagining your decision has failed and asking why. These tools are not one-size-fits-all, but they give readers concrete ways to strengthen their analytical muscles. Conclusion: a lifelong practice. Rutherford closes by emphasizing that critical thinking is not a destination, it's a lifelong discipline. In an age of rapid change, polarization, and information overload, clear thinking is both a personal responsibility and a public good. Critical thinkers don't just benefit themselves, they help build more thoughtful, resilient societies. Ultimately, the goal is not to be right all the time, but to stay curious, humble, and willing to revise our views in pursuit of truth. In that spirit, Critical Thinkers is not just a guide. It's an invitation to lifelong learning and self-examination. Stay tuned for more enlightening content. Head over to www.mybooksandstorytime.com. Don't forget to subscribe and share the magic with friends. And let's grow together through the power of books and interesting stories.